Hey there, brave one. Hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment with your location and the time where you are. And when the story ends, tell us what you felt. 10 true Halloween stories that will make you fear the dark again. Story 1. The Shadow in the Pumpkin Patch. I've always loved Halloween. Growing up in Elmwood, a sleepy town in rural Pennsylvania with barely 1,200 souls, it was the one night where the world felt electric. Kids dashing through streets in costumes, the air sharp with the scent of fallen leaves and distant bonfires. But that love curdled into dread after what happened in October 2012. My name's Jason Harlan, and I was 22 then, fresh out of community college, scraping by on odd jobs to fund my escape to the city. My family's farm, a modest few acres on the town's edge, grew pumpkins every fall for the local market. That year, the harvest was unreal. Rows of fat, orange pumpkins glowing under the crisp October sun. I'd spend evenings out there, carving jack-o'-lanterns for extra cash, earbuds in, listening to true crime podcasts to pass the time. It started small, almost forgettable. One afternoon, hauling a wheelbarrow of pumpkins to the barn, I spotted something odd in the patch's far corner, where the vines tangled into the woods. A pumpkin, bigger than the rest, maybe 50 pounds, sat alone. Its deep, unnatural orange hue shimmered, even in the fading light. I figured it was a fluke, maybe some weird fertilizer quirk. But as I got closer, I saw carvings on its surface, not my goofy jack-o'-lantern faces, but intricate symbols, like runes or ancient script I couldn't place. They weren't fresh, the edges were weathered, as if the pumpkin had grown around them. I brushed my fingers across one, and a cold jolt shot up my arm, like static but sharper, bone deep. I laughed it off, blaming the chilly breeze, and left it there. First mistake. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Our farmhouse was old, all creaks and groans, with thin walls that let in every sound. Around midnight, rustling started in the patch, not the scampering of deer or raccoons, but deliberate, like footsteps crunching through dry leaves. I grabbed my flashlight, heart thumping, and peered out my bedroom window. The full moon bathed the field in silver. Nothing moved at first. Then, a shadow glided between the rows, tall, humanoid, but stretched thin, like smoke given form. It stopped at that strange pumpkin, kneeling, its head bent as if whispering. My pulse hammered so loud I thought it'd wake my parents. I blinked, and the shadow vanished. Just my imagination, I told myself, fed by too many creepy stories. But I didn't sleep. Morning came, and I was back in the patch, drawn to that pumpkin. The symbols looked sharper now, more defined, and a smell hit me, rotten, but not like spoiled fruit. It was wet earth mixed with something metallic, like blood. I decided to cut it open, see what was inside. My knife sank into the rind, and black ooze spilled out, thick and syrupy, staining the dirt. Inside, no seeds, no pulp, just a hollow shell with tiny bones scattered within. They looked like they could be from birds or squirrels, but arranged too neatly, like a ritual. My hands shook as I scooped them out, bagged the mess, and buried it in a ditch by the woods. Problem solved, I thought. Second mistake. That evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, I was back carving pumpkins. The air felt heavier, charged, like before a storm. Kids from town had been by earlier, picking pumpkins for their porches, but as dusk fell, the patch emptied out fast. Too fast. Alone, I heard it, a whisper, low and raspy, carried on the wind. Return, what's mine? It wasn't my imagination. The words formed clear as day, coming from nowhere and everywhere. I dropped my knife, spinning around, flashlight beam darting over the vines. Shadows twisted between the pumpkins, longer than they should have been, moving against the wind. I bolted inside, heart in my throat. Dinner with my parents was tense, Mom's meatloaf, Dad droning about football. I kept glancing at the window, expecting to see that shadow. Mom asked if I was okay. I mumbled about being tired. That night, the rustling returned, louder, closer. I stayed under the covers, like a kid hiding from the boogeyman, but sleep wouldn't come. Around 3 a.m., a new sound, scratching at my window. Slow, deliberate, like nails dragging on glass. Scratch, scratch, pause. Scratch, scratch. Sweat beaded on my forehead. I didn't want to look, but I had to know. Trembling, I yanked the curtain back. A face pressed against the glass, or what was left of one. Pale, withered skin stretched tight over a skull, eyes black voids that seemed to pull at my soul. Its mouth split into a grin, teeth jagged like broken glass. Jason, it hissed, my name slithering through the night. How did it know? I screamed, stumbling back. My parents burst in, flipping on the light, but the face was gone. Dad grabbed his shotgun, searched outside, found nothing. They thought it was a nightmare, maybe too much caffeine. I let them believe it, but the next morning, a faint, clawed handprint lingered on the window, fading by noon. I confided in my best friend, Mike, over coffee at the town diner. He was the skeptical type, always rolling his eyes at ghost stories. "You're pranking me, right?" he said, smirking. But he agreed to check the patch with me. We found the ditch I'd buried the pumpkin in, dug up, the black ooze seeping into the soil like ink. Footprints, bare and elongated with claw-like toes, trailed into the woods. Against my gut we followed. The woods behind our farm were old, dense with gnarled oaks and stories of lost hikers. Locals avoided them after dark, whispering about strange lights or voices. The trail twisted, branches clawing at us. After 20 minutes, we stumbled into a clearing. A stone altar sat in the center, weathered and moss-covered, surrounded by more rune-carved pumpkins, arranged in a perfect circle. They weren't grown there, someone had placed them. And in the middle, a figure hunched, cloaked in shadows. It turned, revealing desiccated flesh, bones protruding like branches, eyes glowing faintly. Mike yelled, "Run!" and bolted. I couldn't move, frozen as the thing spoke, its voice like grinding stones. "You took what binds me. Now you pay the toll." It lunged, faster than anything human. Mike's scream, short, guttural, cut through the air behind me. I ran, branches tearing my skin, lungs burning, not stopping until I collapsed in the patch. Police came that night, searched the woods, found nothing, no altar, no pumpkins, no Mike. They said he must have gotten lost, maybe fell into a ravine. His family blamed me, said we'd fought. The town buzzed with rumors, drugs, foul play. Halloween came, subdued, the joy sucked out. I sold the farm soon after, moved to Pittsburgh like I'd planned. But every October, when the air turns crisp, I hear that whisper. Return. Shadows stretch too long in my peripheral vision, faces flicker in crowds. I keep my doors locked now, lights on. Mike's gone, but I wonder if he's truly lost, or bound, like that thing was. If you're ever in an old pumpkin patch and find one that doesn't belong, walk away. Because the dark remembers, and it's always hungry. Story 2, The Lantern on Hollow Road. My name is Emily Carter, and I've never believed in ghosts. Growing up in a small Ohio town called Millhaven, I was the kid who laughed at campfire stories, rolling my eyes when friends swore they saw something in the woods. I was 19 in 2018, a sophomore at the local community college, working part-time at a diner to cover tuition. Millhaven was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and Halloween was a big deal. Decorations on every porch, kids trick-or-treating until midnight. But there was one place nobody went, Hollow Road, a winding dirt path that cut through the old forest north of town. They said it was cursed, that people disappeared there. I thought it was nonsense, until the night I took a shortcut home. It was October 30th, a chilly Tuesday, and I'd pulled a double shift at the diner. My car, a beat-up 2003 Honda, was in the shop, so I was walking home, cutting through the edge of town where the streetlights petered out. My phone was at 5%, barely enough to light my way, and the main road was a mess of construction detours. Hollow Road was faster, a straight shot to my apartment. Locals avoided it, whispering about the Lantern Man, some old legend about a figure carrying a glowing jack-o'-lantern, luring people into the woods. I figured it was just a story to scare kids, and I was too tired for detours. So, with my backpack slung over one shoulder, I started down the path. The road was narrow, flanked by dense trees that blocked out the moonlight. Gravel crunched under my sneakers, and the air smelled of damp earth and pine. About 10 minutes in, I noticed a faint glow ahead, bobbing like someone carrying a light. I slowed, squinting. It was a jack-o'-lantern, its carved face flickering with an orange flame, swinging gently as if held by an invisible hand. My stomach twisted, but I told myself it was just some prankster kids, maybe setting up for Halloween. I called out, "Hey, who's there?" No answer. The lantern kept moving deeper into the woods, its light steady but unnaturally bright. I should have turned back. But something about that glow pulled at me, like a hook in my chest. I followed, my breath fogging in the cold. The path veered off into the trees, and I realized I wasn't on Hollow Road anymore, just a trail, overgrown with roots. The lantern stayed ahead, always just out of reach, its light casting jagged shadows that seemed to ride. My phone died, plunging me into near darkness except for that glow. Then I heard it, a low hum, like a voice chanting, too soft to make out words. It came from the direction of the lantern. I don't know how long I followed, maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour. Time felt slippery. The trail opened into a clearing, and there it was, the lantern, sitting on a stump in the center. No one held it. The carved face grinned wider than any pumpkin I'd ever seen, the cuts jagged and uneven, like they'd been torn rather than carved. The flame inside flickered, but it didn't waver, even in the wind. Around the clearing, the trees were wrong, twisted, their bark etched with symbols that looked like claw marks. The humming was louder now, coming from the ground itself, vibrating through my boots. I froze, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. "This isn't funny," I said, my voice shaking. The humming stopped. Silence, heavy and suffocating. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the clearing. I spun, trying to follow the sound, but saw nothing. The lantern's flame flared, casting light on something in the shadows, a figure, tall and gaunt, in tattered clothes that looked like they'd been buried for decades. Its face was hidden, but its hands, its hands, were skeletal, clutching another jack-o'-lantern, unlit, its eyes dark and hollow. I backed away, tripping over a root. The figure didn't move, but the lantern on the stump pulsed, and I swear the carved face changed, its grin stretching wider. A voice whispered, not from the figure but from the lantern itself. "Stay, light the way." It was raspy, like dry leaves scraping together. I scrambled to my feet, my backpack catching on branches as I ran. The footsteps followed, faster now, crunching through the underbrush. I didn't look back. The woods seemed to twist around me, the trail looping in ways that made no sense. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I kept running until I stumbled onto Hollow Road again, the gravel a relief underfoot. The footsteps stopped, but the glow lingered behind me, faint, like it was watching. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment, locking the door and collapsing on the floor, sobbing. The next morning, Halloween, I told my coworker Sarah about it. She went pale, said her grandpa had seen the lantern man in the 60s. He'd been a logger, found a jack-o'-lantern in the woods, and heard whispers telling him to light it. He didn't, but his partner did, and was never seen again. Sarah begged me not to go back, said the lantern man claimed anyone who followed his light. I tried to laugh it off, but I couldn't shake it. That night, Halloween, I stayed in, curtains drawn. Around 11 p.m., a knock came at my door. I froze, thinking of trick-or-treaters, but it was too late for kids. Another knock, slower, heavier. I crept to the peephole. Nothing but darkness. Then, on the porch, a faint orange glow flickered. I backed away, heart racing, and called the police. They found nothing, no lantern, no footprints, just my muddy shoes from the night before. I moved out of Millhaven a year later, after dropping out of college. I couldn't stay in a town where every shadow felt like it was watching. But even now, in a new city, I avoid dark roads. Last Halloween, I woke at 3 a.m. to a faint hum, like the one in the woods. My bedroom window was fogged, and on it, Etched in the condensation was a crude jack-o'-lantern face, grinning. I don't know what it wanted, but I know it's not done with me. If you're ever on Hollow Road and see a light in the distance, don't follow it. Some paths don't lead you home. Story 3. The Voices in the Corn Maze. My name is Sarah Thompson, and I'm not the kind of person who scares easily. I grew up in a small farming town in Iowa, where Halloween meant corn mazes, hayrides, and costume parties at the community center. In 2016, I was 24, working as a graphic designer from my parents' attic while saving up to move to Chicago. Every October, our town transformed its biggest cornfield into a maze, a local tradition that drew crowds from miles away. I'd helped design the flyers that year, so I felt a bit of pride in the event. But what happened in that maze on Halloween night made me swear I'd never set foot in one again. The maze was on the Peterson farm, a sprawling property just outside town. Old man Peterson had been running it for decades, but he'd passed away that spring, and his son, Greg, took over. Greg was a friend from high school, quiet but reliable, and he poured his heart into making the maze bigger and better. It was a masterpiece, towering cornstalks, paths that twisted and looped, with scarecrows and fake cobwebs to spook the kids. I volunteered to help out that night, guiding groups through, handing out candy, and making sure nobody got lost. The air was crisp, the sky clear, and the moon hung low, casting long shadows through the corn. Around 9 p.m., the crowd thinned out. Families with kids left, and it was mostly teens and young adults, laughing and daring each other to run through the maze alone. I was stationed at the entrance, bundled in a flannel jacket, when Greg radioed me. "Sarah, got a group of 4 stuck in the east quadrant. Can you fetch them?" I grabbed my flashlight and a walkie-talkie, figuring it was just some drunk college kids messing around. The maze was big, but I knew it like the back of my hand from helping map it out. As I entered the east quadrant, the air grew colder, the corn seeming to close in tighter. The paths here were narrower, designed to disorient. I called out, "Hey, anyone there? Time to head out." No response. Just the rustle of cornstalks in the breeze. Then, faintly, I heard voices, low, overlapping, like a crowd whispering at once. I couldn't make out words, but it sounded urgent, almost angry. I followed the sound, thinking it was the lost group, but the voices shifted, coming from different directions, circling me. My flashlight flickered, the beam dimming for a second before snapping back. I stopped, heart picking up. "Hello?" I called again. The whispering stopped, replaced by a single voice, clear and close, right behind me. "Stay!" It hissed, soft but sharp, like a blade through silk. I spun, shining my light. Nothing but corn and shadows. My walkie crackled, but when I pressed the button, all I got was static mixed with faint, garbled voices, not Greg's. I kept moving, faster now, the path twisting in ways that didn't match the map in my head. Then I saw it, a scarecrow, one we hadn't put up. It stood in the middle of the path, taller than the others, its burlap face crudely stitched, eyes just dark holes. Straw spilled from its sleeves, but it looked wrong, too heavy, like something solid was inside the clothes. The voices started again, louder, coming from the scarecrow. "Stay, join us." I backed away, my flashlight catching a glint of something wet on its burlap face, blood seeping from the stitches. I turned to run, but the corn seemed to shift, the path behind me gone, replaced by a wall of stalks. Panic set in. I pushed through the corn, stalks snapping against my arms, the whispering growing into a chorus, names mixed in, mine, Greg's, others I didn't know. The air smelled of damp earth and something sour, like decay. My flashlight died completely, leaving me in moonlight. Ahead, a small clearing opened, and there was the scarecrow again, or another one, identical, standing beside a pile of old clothes and boots, the kind farmers wore. The pile was too neat, too deliberate, and I swear I saw it move, like something inside was breathing. I radioed Greg, my voice shaking. "Greg, I'm lost. There's something out here." Static, then his voice, faint. "Sarah, get out. Now." but the path was gone. The whispering turned into laughter, cold and hollow, and the scarecrow's head tilted, like it was watching me. I ran blindly, corn tearing at my skin, until I stumbled into another clearing. There, in the center, was a circle of scarecrows, 6 of them, all facing inward, their burlap faces stained dark. In the middle, a patch of dirt looked freshly dug, soft and loose, big enough for a person. I don't know how I got out. I remember running, the voices screaming now, words like stay, and ours echoing. My flashlight came back on just as I saw the maze's exit, Greg's silhouette waving me over. I collapsed at his feet, gasping. He looked spooked, said he'd been trying to reach me for an hour, but the radio kept cutting out. When I told him about the scarecrow and the voices, he went pale. "Sarah, we don't have any scarecrows like that. And that quadrant, it's been closed off since Dad died. He said it wasn't safe." The next day, Halloween, the maze was shut down early. Greg and some workers went in to check. They found nothing, no scarecrows, no clothes, no dug-up patch. But one guy, an old-timer who'd worked for Peterson's dad, pulled me aside. He said the land was bad, that decades ago, workers had gone missing in that field. They'd heard voices, seen things in the corn. He whispered about a harvest ritual, something the first settlers did to appease the land. I laughed it off, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I left Millhaven a month later, took a job in Chicago. I don't do corn mazes anymore. Last Halloween, I got a package, no return address, just a small burlap sack with straw spilling out. Inside was a photo of me in the maze, taken from above, surrounded by corn. I was alone in the picture, but the shadows around me looked like figures, their heads tilted, watching. I burned it. If you're ever in a maze and hear voices, don't listen. And if you see a scarecrow that doesn't belong, run. Because some things in the corn don't want you to leave. Story 4. The costume that wouldn't come off. My name is Alex Rivera, and I've always been obsessed with Halloween costumes. As a kid in suburban New Jersey, I'd spend months planning my outfits, raiding thrift stores and crafting props to make them perfect. By 2014, at 28, I was a freelance photographer in Newark, capturing urban decay and street art for galleries. That year, Halloween fell on a Friday, and my friends dragged me to a big party in an old warehouse district. I needed a killer costume, something unique, not the usual zombie or superhero crap. That's when I found the shop, tucked away in a rundown strip mall on the edge of town. It was called Eternal Threads, a dusty vintage clothing store I'd never noticed before. The sign looked hand-painted, faded, and the windows were papered over with yellowed newspapers from the 80s. I wandered in on a whim, the bell jingling like a warning. The place smelled of mothballs and old leather, racks crammed with clothes that seemed from another era, flapper dresses, Victorian suits, military uniforms crusted with age. The owner, an elderly woman with skin like parchment and eyes that didn't quite focus, shuffled out from behind the counter. "Looking for something special?" she croaked, her voice raspy, like she hadn't spoken in years. I told her about the party, and she nodded, leading me to the back. There, on a mannequin, was the costume, a full-body harlequin suit, black and red diamonds patterned across the fabric, complete with a hooded mask and bells on the points. It looked antique, maybe from a traveling circus in the 1920s, the material stiff but supple, like it had been preserved in oil. "How much?" I asked. She smiled, teeth yellowed and uneven. "For you? $20. But once it's on, it's yours forever." I laughed, thinking it was part of the shtick, and paid cash. She wrapped it in brown paper, whispering something under her breath that I couldn't catch. Back home, I tried it on. It fit like a glove, too perfectly, hugging my skin in a way that felt alive, almost warm. The mask covered my face entirely, with slits for eyes and a stitched grin. In the mirror, I looked eerie, the bells jingling softly even when I stood still. I felt a buzz, like adrenaline, and headed to the party. The warehouse was packed, strobe lights flashing, bass thumping, people in elaborate get-ups dancing under fake cobwebs and glowing pumpkins. My costume was a hit. Friends snapped photos, complimenting how authentic it looked. But halfway through the night, things got weird. The bells started jingling on their own, faint at first, like a rhythm matching the music but offbeat. I itched under the fabric, a prickling sensation crawling over my skin. I ducked into a bathroom to adjust, but when I tried to pull off the mask, it wouldn't budge. The seams had vanished, like the material had fused to my face. I tugged harder, nails digging in, but it was stuck, the grin stretching with my panic. I laughed it off to my buddy Mark, who was dressed as a pirate. Glue or something, I said, but inside my stomach nodded. We partied on, but the itching intensified, turning into a burn, like needles under the suit. Whispers started in my head, not voices from the crowd, but inside, giggling like children, saying things like, "Dance forever." I shook it off as the booze, but I hadn't drunk much. Around midnight, the lights dimmed for a costume contest. On stage, under the spotlights, the suit felt tighter, constricting my breaths. The bells rang louder, drawing eyes. I won third place, but as I bowed, I felt something shift, my skin rippling, like the fabric was merging deeper. I bolted early, driving home with the windows down, the cold air doing nothing to ease the heat building inside. In my apartment, I grabbed scissors, trying to cut the suit off. The blades dulled against it, not even scratching. I peeled at the edges, and where I pulled, my skin came with it, raw, bloody, but painless, like it wasn't mine anymore. Panic hit full force. I called Mark, babbling about the costume. He came over, saw the blood, and freaked. "Alex, that's not fabric, that looks like skin." We rushed to the ER, the bells jingling mockingly with every step. The doctors were baffled. They sedated me, tried to remove it with solvents, scalpels. Nothing worked. The material pulsed under their tools, like it had a heartbeat. X-rays showed anomalies. My bones seemed elongated in places, joints bending wrong. One nurse whispered about a curse, but the doc shut her up. They kept me overnight, pumping painkillers, but in the haze, I dreamed of circuses long gone, performers trapped in suits, laughing eternally as audiences faded. Morning came, and the suit looked normal again, but I knew better. Discharged with bandages and warnings about infection, I went back to the shop. It was gone, boarded up, like it had never existed. The strip mall owner said it had been vacant for years. Online searches turned up nothing, just old forum posts about cursed costumes, from traveling salesmen in the old days, harlequins who made deals with devils for eternal youth, binding souls to their garb. The changes accelerated. My fingers stiffened, bells growing from my knuckles like bone. The masked grin became mine. I couldn't frown, couldn't scream properly. Friends distanced themselves. Mark stopped answering calls after I showed up at his door, suit glistening with something wet. I quit my job, holed up in my apartment, mirrors covered. The whispers grew louder, commanding. "Perform, entertain." I jolt awake, finding myself posing in the dark, body moving on its own. Halloween night that year. A year later? No, it kept going. By 2015, I was a shadow of myself, the suit fully part of me, skin patterned in diamonds, bells tinkling with every heartbeat. I wandered the streets at night, drawn to parties, giggling maniacally as people stared. One night, I lured a kid into an alley, the whispers urging me to share the joy. I stopped myself, horrified, and vanished into the suburbs. I haven't been seen since, or so they say. But if you're at a Halloween party and hear bells jingling without wind, see a harlequin with eyes too real behind the mask, run. Don't buy from strange shops. Some costumes aren't for wearing, they're for becoming. And once it's on, the show never ends. The audience fades, but you dance forever in the dark. Word count, approximately 1050, expanding for depth. Let me tell you more about that shop. The air inside was thick, dust motes dancing in the dim light from a single bulb. Shelves groaned under piles of hats, gloves, shoes that looked worn by ghosts. The old woman moved like she was part of the furniture, her dress a relic from the Dust Bowl era. She didn't haggle, just pointed to the harlequin. It belonged to Jolly Jack. she said, eyes glazing over. He wore it till the end. Never took it off. I asked who Jolly Jack was. A circus performer from the 1930s, vanished mid-show. Legend said he sold his soul for laughs that never stopped. I shrugged, paid, and left, the package heavy in my arms. Trying it on at home, the fabric whispered against my skin, cool at first, then warming unnaturally. The bells were real silver, tarnished but chiming clear. At the party, the warehouse pulsed with energy, DJs spinning horror remixes, fog machines choking the air. My photos from that night, later developed, show me in the suit, but in the background, shadows mimic my poses, like echoes. The fusion started subtle, edges blending, no zipper visible. In the bathroom mirror, my eyes through the slits looked wider, pupils dilated. The burns spread from my chest outward, like veins of fire. Mark tried helping peel it, his fingers coming away bloody. "This isn't right, man. It's like it's alive." At the hospital, chaos ensued. Nurses gasped as the suit healed, cuts they made, fabric knitting back. Whispers leaked from me, audible to others. "Join the troupe." A psych consult labeled it delusion, but the scans didn't lie. My skeleton shifting, ribs curving like a jester's bow. Researching later, from hospital Wi-Fi, I found clippings, similar cases in the 50s, people in vintage costumes unable to remove them, bodies contorting over time. One ended in an asylum, laughing till death. Now years on, I lurk in the shadows of Halloween nights, the bell's my only voice. If you find eternal threads, walk away. Some threads bind tighter than blood, and the dark stage awaits its next performer. The curtain never falls. Story 5. The trick-or-treaters who never left. My name is Rachel Nguyen, and I used to love handing out candy on Halloween. I'm 31 now, living in a quiet cul-de-sac in suburban Oregon, but back in 2019, I was in a different house, a fixer-upper in a small town called Willow Creek, just outside Portland. The place was old, built in the 1920s, with creaky floors and a wraparound porch perfect for Halloween decorations. I was 25 then, a high school art teacher, single, and excited to make my first house feel like home. Halloween was my favorite holiday, carving pumpkins, stringing lights, the whole deal. But after that night, I can't even look at a candy bowl without my hands shaking. Willow Creek was the kind of town where everyone decorated for Halloween, and trick-or-treaters roamed in packs. My street, Maple Lane, was lined with craftsman homes, all decked out with skeletons and fake gravestones. I'd gone all in, a fog machine, glowing jack-o'-lanterns, even a motion sensor that cackled when people walked by. I had a big bowl of Snickers and Reese's, ready for the kids. By 6 p.m., the street was alive, kids in superhero costumes, princess dresses, and ghost sheets giggling as they ran from house to house. I sat on the porch, sipping hot cider, feeling like I'd finally found my place in the world. Around 8 p.m., the crowds thinned, but a group of 3 kids approached, moving slower than the others. They were small, maybe 10 or 11, in costumes that looked off. One was a clown with a cracked porcelain mask, another a scarecrow with straws spilling from torn seams, and the third a skeleton, its bones painted on a black suit that seemed too big, dragging on the ground. Their costumes looked handmade, but not in a cute, crafty way, more like they'd been stitched together from scraps, stained and frayed. They didn't carry candy bags, just pillowcases, heavy and lumpy, like they'd been collecting for hours. "Trick or treat," they said in unison, their voices flat, almost mechanical. I smiled, trying to ignore the chill crawling up my spine. "Great costumes," I said, dropping candy into their pillowcases. The clown tilted its head, the mask-painted smile unnaturally wide. "Can we come in?" it asked, voice muffled but sharp. I laughed, thinking it was a kid's attempt at a prank. "Sorry, just candy tonight," I said. The skeleton stepped closer, its painted skull gleaming under my porch light. "We're cold," it whispered. I glanced at their hands, bare, pale, almost blue in the chill. No parents in sight. Something felt wrong, but I brushed it off, chalking it up to the spooky vibe of the night. They didn't move. Just stood there, staring. The scarecrow's burlap face shifted, like something moved underneath. "Please," it said, "let us warm up." My heart sped up. "Where are your parents?" I asked, gripping the candy bowl tighter. They didn't answer, just took another step forward, their pillowcases dragging on the porch. I shut the door, locking it, and watched through the peephole. They stayed there for a minute, motionless, then turned and walked into the fog, their shapes fading. I tried to shake it off, turned up the TV to drown out my nerves. But around 10 p.m., I heard knocking, slow, rhythmic, at the back door. I froze. The front door was one thing, but the back? It led to a fenced yard, no gate to the street. I crept to the kitchen, peering through the blinds. The fog was thick, but I saw them, the same 3 kids, standing in my yard, pillowcases at their feet. The clown's mask glinted, its eyes black holes. The skeleton raised a hand, pointing at me through the glass. "You didn't let us in," it said, voice clear despite the door between us. I called 911, whispering about intruders. The operator said police were on their way, told me to stay calm. But the knocking grew louder, spreading, front door, windows, even the walls, like they were circling the house. I grabbed a kitchen knife, heart pounding, and hid in the living room, curtains drawn. The fog machine outside had shut off, but the air inside felt heavy, smoky. Then, a sound from upstairs, a giggle, high and childlike, echoing through the vents. I lived alone. The police arrived 20 minutes later, lights flashing. They found nothing, no kids, no footprints, just my candy bowl tipped over on the porch, Snickers scattered. The officer, a gruff guy named Daniels, said it was probably teens messing around, but his eyes lingered on the empty pillowcases I'd seen, now lying in my yard, torn and stained with something dark. He didn't mention it, just told me to lock up tight. The next day, I asked neighbors if they'd seen the kids. Nobody had. I checked local news, social media, no reports of missing children or weird costumes. But at the library, digging through old town records for a distraction, I found something. A 1947 newspaper article about 3 kids, siblings, who vanished on Halloween night in Willow Creek. They'd been trick-or-treating on Maple Lane, last seen in homemade costumes, a clown, a scarecrow, a skeleton. The article included a grainy photo, and my blood ran cold. The masks, the stitching, it was them. The report said they knocked on doors, asking to come in, but no one let them. They were never found. I moved out that spring, couldn't stay in that house. The new place is safer, gated, but Halloween still gets me. Last year, I stayed in, lights off, no decorations. At midnight I heard it, a faint knock at my window. I didn't look, but the next morning, a single Snickers bar sat on my doorstep, wrapper torn, chocolate oozing like it had been crushed. If trick-or-treaters come to your door and their costumes look too old, too real, don't open it. Some kids never stop knocking, and they're not looking for candy. Story 6. The Reflection in the Jack-o'-lantern. My name is Connor Blake, and I've never been one for superstitions. Growing up in a coastal town in Maine, I spent my childhood shrugging off tales of haunted lighthouses and cursed fishing nets. By 2020, I was 27, working as a carpenter in Rockport, a quiet place where Halloween meant foggy streets, carved pumpkins on every doorstep, and kids chasing each other in cheap costumes. I lived alone in a small rental house near the harbor, a drafty old place with warped windows and a basement that smelled like mildew. That Halloween, though, something happened that made me question everything I thought I knew about the world, and what looks back when you stare too long. It started with a pumpkin. I'd picked it up from a roadside stand a few days before Halloween, a big, lopsided thing with a warty rind. I wasn't much for decorating, but my neighbor, Mrs. Hargrove, an elderly widow who baked me cookies sometimes, insisted I put out a jack-o'-lantern to keep the spirits happy. She was always saying stuff like that, old Maine folklore about warding off ghosts. I humored her, carved a simple face, triangle eyes, jagged mouth, and set it on my porch with a candle inside. That night, October 29th, the flame flickered brighter than it should have, casting shadows that danced across the front yard, even through the thick fog rolling in from the harbor. I noticed something odd when I went to blow out the candle before bed. The pumpkin's face looked different. The cuts I'd made were rough, uneven, but now they seemed smoother, sharper, like someone had refined them. The eyes were narrower, the mouth curved into a smirk. I chalked it up to my imagination, maybe the candlelight playing tricks, and went inside. But as I locked the door, I heard a sound, a low, rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming on wood. It was coming from the porch. I checked through the window, but there was nothing, just the jack-o'-lantern glowing in the fog. Sleep was restless that night. My house creaked constantly, but this was different. Whispers, faint and garbled, seemed to seep through the walls. Not words, just sounds, like a radio tuned between stations. I told myself it was the wind, the harbor always noisy at night, but when I woke at 3 a.m., the tapping was back, louder, inside the house. It was coming from the living room, where I kept a big, cracked mirror propped against the wall, a thrift store find I hadn't hung yet. I grabbed my flashlight and crept downstairs, my bare feet cold on the hardwood. The mirror reflected the room, dim in the moonlight, but something was off. In the glass, the jack-o'-lantern was inside, sitting on my coffee table, its flame blazing despite being unlit on the porch. And its face, it was moving, the carved eyes shifting to follow me, the smirk widening. I spun around, expecting to see it behind me, but the room was empty. In the mirror, though, it stared, and now there was a figure, blurry, humanoid, standing just behind the pumpkin. It was tall, shrouded, its face hidden except for eyes that glowed like the candle's flame. I stumbled back, hard hammering, and the tapping stopped. The mirror showed only my reflection now, pale and sweating. I didn't sleep after that. Morning came, gray and damp, and I checked the pumpkin. It was back on the porch, but the carvings were even more detailed now, intricate, almost lifelike, the eyes deep and hollow. I wanted to smash it, but Mrs. Hargrove's words about spirits nagged at me. Instead, I moved it to the backyard, far from the house, and doused the candle. Work kept me busy all day, building cabinets for a client, but my mind kept drifting to that mirror, that figure. I didn't tell anyone. My buddies at the bar would have laughed, called me paranoid. Halloween night, I stayed in, avoiding the trick-or-treaters. I turned off the porch light, but around 8 p.m., the tapping started again. This time from the basement. I hadn't been down there in weeks. It was damp, cluttered with old furniture from the previous tenant. I grabbed a crowbar, more for courage than anything, and descended the rickety stairs. The air was thick, the mildew smell stronger, mixed with something sharper, like burnt wax. My flashlight caught the mirror, which I'd forgotten I'd stored down there after the first night. It was propped against the wall, and in its reflection, the jack-o'-lantern was back, glowing brighter than ever. The figure was there too, clearer now, tall, cloaked in something like burlap, its face a void except for those burning eyes. It raised a hand, pointing at me, and the whispers returned, louder, forming words. "Look, see me." The pumpkin's face in the mirror twisted, its mouth opening wider, revealing teeth, actual teeth, jagged and yellow. I swung the crowbar at the mirror, shattering it into 100 pieces. The whispers turned to a scream, high and piercing, and the air grew so cold my breath froze. I ran upstairs, slamming the basement door, and barricaded it with a chair. The police came after I called, frantic, saying someone was in my house. They found nothing, no pumpkin in the basement, no figure, just broken glass. They suggested I lay off the horror movies, but one officer, an older guy, lingered. He asked about the jack-o'-lantern, said his grandma used to talk about spirit lanterns, in Rockport, carved to trap things that wandered on Halloween. "If you break the vessel, you let it out," he said quietly, then left. I moved out a month later, left the pumpkin in the yard, rotted and collapsed by then. But last Halloween, in my new apartment, I woke to tapping on my bedroom window. Outside, in the dark, a faint orange glow flickered, and in the glass's reflection, I saw it, a carved face, smirking, eyes locked on mine. I don't carve pumpkins anymore. If you see a jack-o'-lantern that looks too real, too alive, don't look too long. Something might be looking back, and it doesn't like to be ignored. Story 7: The Dollhouse on Sycamore Street. My name is Mia Larson, and I've always been a bit of a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. Growing up in a small town in upstate New York, I heard all the ghost stories, haunted bridges, cursed lakes, but I chalked them up to bored locals spinning tales. In 2017, I was 29, a real estate agent trying to make a name for myself in Hudson, a town known for its quaint charm and historic homes. Halloween was big there, with cobblestone streets lined with jack-o'-lanterns and kids in costumes darting through the fog. That October, I took on a listing that changed everything, a house on Sycamore Street, and what I found inside made me question reality itself. The house was a Victorian relic, 3 stories of peeling paint and gingerbread trim, empty for years after the last owner, an eccentric widow named Clara Voss, died in 2010. The bank wanted it sold fast, so I got the keys and started prepping for an open house. The place was a mess, dusty chandeliers, warped floors, and a musty smell like old books left in the rain. But it had charm, the kind that could fetch a good price with the right buyer. I spent days cleaning, staging rooms, and ignoring the locals' whispers about Clara's odd hobbies, and how kids avoided the house on Halloween. The first weird thing happened while I was in the attic, sorting through junk to clear space. Tucked in a corner, under a tarp, was a dollhouse, an exact replica of the house itself, down to the chipped paint and tiny stained glass windows. It was exquisite, handcrafted, but eerie in its precision. Tiny furniture filled the rooms, and in each, a porcelain doll sat, 6 in total, each dressed in old-fashioned clothes, their faces painted with unsettling detail. One looked like a young girl in a pinafore, another an old man with a cane, even a woman in a widow's veil that reminded me of Clara. I figured they were her creations, maybe a collector's obsession, and moved the dollhouse to the living room as a quirky selling point. That night, October 30th, I stayed late to finish staging. The house felt heavier after dark, the silence thick. Broken only by creaks I blamed on the old wood. Around 10 p.m., I heard a faint giggle, like a child's, coming from the living room. I froze, alone in the house, my phone on the kitchen counter. The giggle came again, sharper, followed by a soft thud, like something small falling. I crept downstairs, flashlight in hand, and found the dollhouse open, one of the dolls, the girl in the pinafore, lying on its side, her glass eyes staring up at me. I hadn't touched it. My heart raced, but I told myself it was just gravity, the old thing unsteady. I righted the doll and closed the dollhouse, but as I turned away, I heard it again, giggling, now from multiple voices, echoing through the house. The air grew cold, my breath visible in the dim light. I checked every room, finding nothing, but when I returned to the living room, the dollhouse was open again, all 6 dolls arranged in a circle on the floor, facing outward, their tiny hands linked. I backed away, my skin crawling, and noticed something new, a faint scratching from inside the walls, like nails dragging across plaster. I grabbed my things and left, locking the door behind me. At home, I couldn't sleep, the giggling replaying in my head. The next morning, Halloween, I called my friend Jenna, a fellow agent who'd grown up in Hudson. She went quiet when I mentioned the dollhouse. Clara Voss was into some weird stuff, she said. My mom said she made dolls to trap spirits she thought lived in the house. Nobody went near that place after she died. I laughed it off, but my stomach churned. I had to go back for the open house that afternoon. The house looked normal in daylight, but the dollhouse was still there, now closed, the dolls back inside. I avoided it, focusing on setting up flyers and cookies for visitors. A few families came, but they didn't stay long, saying the house felt off. By evening, as trick-or-treaters filled the streets, I was alone again, waiting for stragglers. That's when the lights flickered, and the giggling started again, louder, coming from upstairs. I grabbed my flashlight, cursing myself for not leaving earlier, and climbed the stairs. The sound led me to the master bedroom, where an old vanity mirror stood. In its reflection, I saw the dollhouse, open, the dolls standing in the tiny replica of the room I was in. But they weren't alone. Shadows moved behind them, human-shaped, their outlines blurry but distinct, 6 figures, mirroring the dolls. The girl doll turned its head, its glass eyes locking on me through the mirror. A voice, small and cold, whispered, "Play with us, Mia." My name. I hadn't said it aloud. I ran, but the stairs seemed longer, the air thick like molasses. The scratching in the walls grew frantic, and the giggling turned to wails, like children crying in pain. I stumbled into the living room, where the dollhouse was open again, the dolls now arranged on the floor in the shape of a star. The front door wouldn't budge, the lock jammed. I called Jenna, sobbing, and she arrived with her brother, a cop. They broke in, found me curled up in the foyer, the dolls scattered around me. The police searched the house, found nothing unusual. The dollhouse was just a dollhouse, they said, probably left by squatters playing a prank. But Jenna saw the fear in my eyes and took me to her place. The next day, I quit the listing. The bank sold the house to a developer who tore it down. I thought that was the end, but last Halloween, a package arrived at my new apartment. No return address, just a small porcelain doll, the girl in the pinafore, her painted smile cracked. That night, I heard giggling through my walls, and in my bathroom mirror, a shadow moved, holding a tiny house. I don't live in Hudson anymore, but I check my locks every night. If you find a dollhouse that looks too real, don't touch it. Some games don't end when you leave the house. Story 8. The Song from the Old Well. My name is Liam Walsh, and I've always been drawn to the quiet of the countryside. In 2018, I was 26, a freelance writer living in a rented cottage on the outskirts of a small town in Vermont called Black Hollow. The place was perfect for my work, remote, surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests, with only the occasional car rumbling down the dirt road nearby. Halloween wasn't a big deal out there. The nearest neighbors were a mile away, and trick-or-treaters didn't bother making the trek. But the land had its own way of marking the season, and what happened that October made me realize some songs are better left unsung. The cottage sat at the edge of a meadow, and behind it was an old stone well, capped with a rotting wooden cover. The landlord, a gruff farmer named Mr. Tate, warned me not to mess with it. "Been there since before the town," he said, spitting tobacco into the grass. "Folks say it's bad luck to open it." I nodded, figuring it was just local superstition, like the stories I'd heard about witches in the woods or lights in the hills. I was there to write, not chase ghost stories, so I left the well alone and focused on my novel. It started on October 28th, a chilly evening with a low fog creeping through the meadow. I was working late, the glow of my laptop the only light in the cottage, when I heard it, a faint melody, like a lullaby, drifting from outside. It was soft, almost sweet, sung in a language I couldn't place, the notes weaving through the wind. I paused, thinking it was a neighbor's radio or maybe kids messing around, but the nearest house was too far for sound to carry like that. Curious, I stepped onto the porch, the cold biting my bare feet. The song was clearer now, coming from the direction of the well. I grabbed a flashlight and walked to the backyard. The well's cover was weathered, moss creeping over the stones, but it looked undisturbed. The melody grew louder as I approached, the voice, female, I thought, singing in a slow, mournful cadence. It was beautiful but wrong, like it didn't belong in the air. I shone my light into the gaps of the cover, expecting to see water or maybe an animal trapped inside. Nothing but darkness, deeper than it should have been, like the beam couldn't reach the bottom. The singing stopped abruptly, replaced by a low hum, vibrating through the ground. I backed away, heart racing, and went inside, locking the door. The hum followed, faint but persistent, seeping through the walls. I tried to work, but the melody stuck in my head, looping until I found myself humming it without meaning to. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the well, its stones pulsing like a heartbeat. The next morning, I called Mr. Tate, asking about the well. He got quiet, then said, "Don't mess with it, Liam. My grandpa said it's where the old songs live. You hear 'em, you ignore 'em." He hung up before I could ask more. October 29th, I stayed inside, but the singing returned at dusk, louder, joined by other voices, children, men, a chorus weaving together. I recorded it on my phone, but when I played it back, all I got was static, threaded with faint whispers of my name. Liam, come closer. I deleted the file, my hands shaking. That night, I heard footsteps outside, circling the cottage, heavy and uneven, like someone dragging a limp. I peeked through the curtains, but the fog was too thick, swallowing everything except the faint glow of my porch light. Halloween arrived, and I decided to leave for the night, drive to town, and stay with a friend. But as I packed my bag, the singing turned into a wail, sharp and desperate, coming from the well. I couldn't ignore it. It felt like it was pulling me, like a hook in my chest. Against every instinct, I went outside. The well's cover was ajar, just an inch, enough to see darkness swirling below, not like water but like smoke. The voices were clear now, singing my name in a loop, urging me to look inside. I don't know why I did it. I lifted the cover, the wood splintering in my hands. The air turned frigid, and the singing stopped. In the silence, something moved in the well, a shape climbing up fast. It was humanoid but wrong, limbs too long, skin gray and slick, eyes like oil slicks reflecting the moonlight. It reached for me, fingers clawing the air, and I dropped the cover, stumbling back. The wail erupted again, shaking the ground, and I ran to my car, peeling out without looking back. I stayed in town that night, crashing on my friend's couch, but the melody followed, humming in my dreams. The next day, I returned with Mr. Tate and his son, both armed with shotguns. The well was sealed, the cover nailed shut with fresh boards, but Mr. Tate's face was pale. "You opened it," he said, not a question. He told me about a girl in the 1800s, a singer who'd been accused of witchcraft and thrown into the well by settlers. Her songs, they said, trapped souls, luring anyone who listened too closely. I moved out a week later, back to the city. The cottage was raised the next year, the well filled with concrete. But every Halloween, I hear it, the lullaby, faint, drifting through my apartment. Last year, I found my window open, a single wet handprint on the sill, smelling of damp stone. If you hear a song from a place it shouldn't be, don't listen. Some voices don't want to be heard, they want to be answered. Story 9, The Mask in the Attic. My name is Hannah Klein, and I've always been a bit of a hoarder when it comes to old things. In 2015, I was 23, fresh out of art school, living in a creaky townhouse in Savannah, Georgia, that I'd inherited from my great-aunt Evelyn. She'd been a collector of oddities, antique furniture, dusty paintings, and shelves of knickknacks that smelled of time. Savannah was perfect for Halloween, with its moss-draped oaks and ghost tours weaving through historic streets. I loved the vibe, decorating the porch with pumpkins and fake cobwebs, ready to hand out candy to kids in costumes. But that Halloween, something I found in the attic turned my love for old things into a fear I can't shake. The townhouse was a maze of narrow halls and hidden nooks, the kind of place that felt alive with history. Evelyn had died a year earlier, leaving me the place, and I'd spent months sorting through her stuff. The attic was the last frontier, packed with crates and trunks she'd never mentioned. On October 27th, I was up there, digging through boxes for anything I could sell to cover the house's endless repairs. That's when I found it, a wooden mask, tucked inside a velvet-lined case, like it was precious. It was carved with intricate swirls and sharp angles, not quite human, with deep eye sockets and a mouth frozen in a silent scream. The wood was dark, almost black, polished to a sheen that caught the light wrong, like it absorbed it instead. I held it up, feeling a chill despite the stuffy attic air. There was a note pinned to the case, in Evelyn's spidery handwriting. "Do not wear. Keep locked." No explanation, just that. I figured it was one of her eccentricities. She'd always been superstitious, burning sage and muttering about spirits. I brought the mask downstairs, thinking it'd make a cool Halloween decoration, maybe spook the trick-or-treaters. I set it on the living room mantel, its empty eyes staring across the room. That night, I noticed the house felt quieter than usual, the usual creaks and groans gone, like it was holding its breath. Around midnight I heard a hum, low, almost inaudible, like a tuning fork struck far away. It came from the living room. I crept downstairs, phone in hand, and saw the mask glowing faintly, a soft, sickly green light pulsing from its eye sockets. The hum grew louder, forming words I couldn't understand, like a chant in a language older than the house. I grabbed the mask, meaning to shove it back in its case, but it was warm, almost hot, and my fingers tingled where they touched it. I locked it in a drawer, heart pounding, and went to bed, telling myself it was just my imagination, maybe a trick of the moonlight. The next day, October 28th, I tried to focus on work, sketching designs for a local gallery, but the mask kept creeping into my thoughts. I checked the drawer. It was still there, but the case was open, the note crumpled on the floor. I taped it shut and moved it to the attic, burying it under a pile of blankets. That night, the hum returned, louder, joined by a tapping, like someone knocking softly on the attic hatch. I didn't check. Instead, I blasted music, trying to drown it out, but the chant slipped through, whispering my name. "Hannah, where me?" I unplugged everything, checked the locks, and slept with the lights on. October 29th, I called my friend Marcus, a history buff who ran ghost tours in Savannah. I told him about the mask, leaving out the weirder details. He came over, excited, and dug through Evelyn's old journals while I showed him the attic. He found an entry from 1973, describing a mask Evelyn bought from a street vendor in New Orleans, who claimed it was carved from cursed wood by a voodoo priestess. She wrote about hearing voices, seeing shadows that moved without light. "It wants a face," she'd scrawled, the ink smudged like she'd been shaking. Marcus laughed, said it was probably a tall tale, but suggested I burn the mask, just in case. I couldn't bring myself to do it. It felt like destroying a piece of art. Halloween morning, I woke to find the attic hatch open, the blankets scattered. The mask was back on the mantel, its case nowhere in sight. I don't know how it got there. The hum was constant now, vibrating in my bones, and the air in the house felt thick, like I was breathing through cloth. I cancelled my plans to hand out candy, locked the mask in a safe I'd inherited with the house, and drove to Marcus's place. But as I left, I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw it, the mask, reflected in the glass, worn by a figure sitting in my back seat, its carved mouth grinning wider than it should have. I swerved, nearly crashing, but when I looked back, the seat was empty. I stayed with Marcus that night, but the hum followed, faint, like it was inside my skull. He burned sage, read some old prayers, but it didn't help. At midnight, my phone lit up with a photo I hadn't taken, me, sleeping in my bed, the mask hovering above my face, its eyes glowing. I screamed, dropped the phone. Marcus called a priest, who blessed the house, but the hum only grew louder, the chant clearer. "Where me, be me." I moved out a week later, left the townhouse to rot. The mask is still in that safe. As far as I know, the new owners never mentioned it. But last Halloween, I woke in my new apartment to find my bedroom mirror fogged, a single word scratched into it. Hannah. The hum was there, too, faint but growing. If you find a mask that feels too alive, don't touch it. Some things want more than your face. They want your soul, and they'll wait forever to claim it. Story 10. The Children's Shadows. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and I've always been a bit of a night owl. In 2021, I was 30, a middle school history teacher living in a small town called Ashwood, nestled in the rolling hills of Kentucky. Halloween was a big deal there. Main Street turned into a festival of carved pumpkins, hay bales, and kids in costumes racing through the dusk. I loved the energy, volunteering to chaperone the town's trick-or-treat route, keeping an eye on the chaos. My house, a modest brick bungalow on the edge of town, was near a wooded lot where an old schoolhouse had burned down in the 1950s. Locals said it was haunted, but I dismissed it as folklore, the kind of thing kids whispered to scare each other. That Halloween, though, I learned some shadows don't fade with the morning. It started on October 30th, a Saturday, when I was setting up my yard for trick-or-treaters. I'd gone all out, jack-o'-lanterns flickering on the porch, a fake graveyard with foam tombstones, and a speaker playing eerie sound effects. As I hammered a stake into the ground, I noticed something odd in the wooded lot across the street. The trees were bare, their branches clawing at the gray sky, but among them, I saw shapes, small, child-sized, flitting between the trunks. They moved too fast to be kids, more like smudges of shadow, there and gone. I blinked, figuring it was the late afternoon light, maybe reflections off the wet leaves after a morning rain. But the air felt heavier, charged, like before a storm. That night, I was grading papers when I heard laughter, high-pitched, like children playing, coming from the lot. It was faint but clear, cutting through the hum of my TV. I stepped onto the porch, flashlight in hand, and scanned the woods. Nothing moved, but the laughter continued, looping, almost mocking. I called out, "Hey, it's late, go home!" The sound stopped instantly, leaving a silence so thick it pressed against my ears. I went back inside, locked the door, and tried to shake the unease. Kids, I told myself, probably sneaking around before Halloween. The next day, Halloween, I was busy with the town's trick-or-treat event. Ashwood's main street was packed, kids darting between shops, their bags stuffed with candy. I patrolled the route, chatting with parents, but my eyes kept drifting to the wooded lot at the end of town, near my house. Around 7 p.m., as the sky darkened, I saw them again, those shadowy shapes, moving just beyond the streetlight's glow. They weren't running or playing, they stood still, facing me, their outlines blurry but distinctly childlike. I blinked, and they were gone. A parent nearby asked if I was okay. I mumbled something about being tired and kept moving. Back home that night, around 10 p.m., I was cleaning up, dousing jack-o'-lanterns, tossing candy wrappers, when the laughter started again, louder, closer, like it was in my yard. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The lot was dark, but the shadows were there, clearer now, 5 or 6 small figures, standing in a line at the edge of the woods. They didn't move, just watched, their forms flickering like bad TV reception. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice sharper than I meant. No answer, but the laughter turned into whispers, overlapping, saying, "Come play, stay with us." My heart pounded, but I'm not one to run from things. I crossed the street, flashlight sweeping the trees. The figures vanished, but the ground felt soft, uneven, like it had been disturbed. In the beam, I saw something, chalk drawings on a flat stone, crude but deliberate, stick figures holding hands, their heads oversized, eyes big black circles. The air smelled wrong, like ash and damp cloth, and the whispers grew louder, circling me. I backed away, tripping over a root, and ran home, locking every door. Inside, the house was too quiet. I turned on all the lights, but the shadows seemed to linger, pooling in corners where the light didn't reach. Around midnight, my power flickered, and the whispers came from inside, behind walls, under floors, like the house itself was speaking. I grabbed my phone to call my friend Nate, a local cop, but the screen froze, displaying a photo I hadn't taken, me, standing in the lot, surrounded by those shadowy children, their hands reaching for me. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I went to the library, digging through town records. An article from 1953 described the schoolhouse fire, 6 kids, all under 10, trapped inside when a heater malfunctioned. The town buried the site, planted trees, tried to forget. But there were older stories, too, settlers in the 1800s talking about shadow folk, who lured children into the woods, never to return. The librarian, an old woman named Ruth, saw what I was reading and went pale. "You saw them, didn't you?" she whispered. "They come back every Halloween, looking for friends." I moved out of Ashwood a month later, renting a place in Lexington. I don't decorate for Halloween anymore, don't open my door. Last year, I woke at 3 a.m. to laughter outside my apartment. My window overlooked a parking lot, no woods in sight, but there, in the glass's reflection, were the shadows, small, flickering, their chalk-like eyes fixed on me. I keep salt by my door now, like Ruth suggested, but it doesn't help. If you see kids in the woods who don't belong, don't look too long. Some shadows want company, and they'll follow you home.